So this week I'm covering a few tips for new supervisors that can help you motivate your team and increase efficiency. And if you're not a new supervisor, these tips can still be very helpful, even if you're in an upper management role, or if you're an entrepreneur, or if you're in a senior leadership role. A lot of times we tend to kind of overlook the things that are really important in building that trust and building that morale. And these are some things that can help you get back to kind of the grassroots of your organization and really create that type of team culture that you're looking for. Now, this is a continuation of our soft skills series. If you recall, in the first session, I talked about what soft skills are and why they're important in just about any role in any organization. Then we divided the skills into segments. We talked about leadership skills and management skills. We've done that over the last couple of weeks. This week, we're talking about supervisory skills. And then next week, we're going to talk about interpersonal skills. Those are the people skills that are important in just about any career that you're in. So in this session, I'm going to focus on a list of supervisory skills, things that we really need to know if we want to be a good supervisor, if we want to be a good coach for the people that work for us and work with us. And as we talked about in the soft skills session, supervisor skills they're a subset of managerial skills. And for instance, if in the very first couple of sessions that I covered on this topic, we talked about how leaders kind of create the vision for the new path. These are the folks that this path didn't even exist before the leader came up with it. And so it's a new route. It's a new path that we're taking. And then the manager picks up where the leader leaves off and makes the navigation of that path more efficient. Well, supervisors have the same goal as the manager. However, a lot of times the supervisor doesn't yet have the authority to make changes to that process or to the personnel. And so a lot of times supervisors are often, I kind of call them managers in training. They're responsible for the results. However, in many cases, they may not have a lot of authority yet. And as a result, people skills are going to be way more important to their success. A good example of this, by the way, outside of kind of normal business structures, would be like nonprofits. A lot of times directors and folks who work at a nonprofit, they're dealing with volunteers. These are people that are volunteering their time to help the cause. And so a lot of times these folks will have responsibility for what these volunteers are doing, but not necessarily authority. And we can't make the volunteers do something. We can ask them, and we can use good people skills though. And that's why this type of skill set can be important in a lot of different ways in different organizations. So the supervisor and the manager, by the way, because they have the same goal, they share two key skills. They share organizational skills and time management. However, the remainder of the important skills for supervisors are quite different than the manager skills. And so let me give you the 5 things that I've identified as really key skills for supervisors. So the first 2 skills are the same as the top 2 skills for managers as well. It's organizational skills. You have to be able to organize things, and time management skills. You have to manage your time and the time of the people that work around us, work for us. The third one, though, is a little different than the managerial skills. It's communication skills. You got to be able to communicate. A lot of times the supervisor is going to be the conduit or the go-between between management and the workforce. And so they have to be excellent communicators. The fourth area is training skills. They have to be able to get the people that work around them, work for them, to a higher level of performance in a more efficient way of performing in their job duties. So they have to be good trainers as well. And then the last one is the one I talked about in the intro, which is people skills. You have to be able to motivate and inspire the folks on the team to do a really good job. So let's cover each one of these skills in just a little bit more detail. So starting with tip number 1 or skill number 1, it's organizational skills. We have to look for ways to help our teams become more efficient. So first-time supervisors often inherit their teams, right? Most of the time, somebody else has hired these folks, and a lot of times other people have actually trained them, and we're kind of jumping in. So it's an inherited team. So if you're a first-time supervisor, a lot of times you may not have the ability to hire and build your own team. and if you do, by the way, if you're a first time supervisor and you're able to build your own team, if you're able to hire your own team members, you're like a unicorn. It's just very, very rare. So supervisors have to really master the skill of organizing a team that someone else created. And by the way, those who can do that, supervisors who can do that, they excel very, very quickly in all kinds of different organizations. So I'll give you a good example. A few years back, our marketing supervisor decided to hire some young people to help us with social media, right? I mean, the marketing team, by the way, is a fairly young team. So they're kind of into social media and that kind of stuff. That's why we hired them. But it's still very difficult to keep up with all the new trends. The longer that the older that we get, the less trendy we are. I mean, I know I'm a dad, right? So basically, what she decided to do was, hey, let's hire some brand new, high school graduates, college graduates to come in and help us with social media, and that way we're staying on the cusp of being the trendsetters. And one was a graphic artist who kind of knew social media inside and out because she grew up on it. However, she had very few programming skills. So she wasn't really well versed in websites and stuff like that. So the things that the supervisor was asking her to do, they were actually fairly simple tasks, but they involved a lot of repetitious steps. And for somebody who's brand new in that task, it was kind of challenging for the young person. So to help this new employee, the supervisor typed up a checklist and created a flow chart and then posted them in like a 3-ring binder. It was a really low tech solution to kind of a high tech problem. But that little checklist that the supervisor created served as a reminder for what kind of tasks to do when this new person had completed a project. A lot of times when someone new comes into the organization, and they can kind of speed through projects much more quickly because they don't have as many time constraints. And if the supervisor is busy, then that person can kind of be sitting around going, God, what am I supposed to do now? I'm not really sure. But by simply creating a list, the supervisor kind of increased the efficiency of the team member and also reduced idle time because now that person she had something to do when she had finished her next project. So a good supervisor is kind of the proverbial oil can that makes the machinery run more smoothly. It's just that the machinery here is their team members. So basically, if you want to be a good supervisor, use good supervisory skills, look for ways to organize your team in a more efficient way. So the second skill that is really important for new supervisors, any supervisor really, is time management. Your goal is really to have no wasted time in your team members, no idle time. So, and in fact, this is one of the most critical skills. Time management is really one of the most critical skills for supervisors. And what's critical about it is that a good supervisor will first want to prioritize activities that are done within that group, that department, whatever it is that we're supervising. One of the best exercises, by the way, that I ever came across was from Stephen Covey. And I'm not sure if he actually created it. That was the first place that I kind of saw this. But his advice was to divide a piece of paper into 4 equal quadrants. In the first quadrant, you would write down things that are both important and urgent. And then in the second quadrant, you would write down things that you do that are important, but not yet urgent. So quadrant number 1, things that they're really, really important and they're urgent. We have to do them right now. These are important things that have to be done right now. In quadrant 2, those are things that are also important, but they haven't yet gotten to the point where they're urgent yet, right? And so those would be things that we would plan for. And then the third quadrant, you would write down things that are urgent. They're things that we have to do right now, but they're not really important. And so a lot of times these are kind of wasted time things. And then finally, in the last quadrant, you would write down things that are neither important nor urgent. They're not urgent and they're not important at all, but a lot of times those are things that we tend to get bogged down in. So when you create your chart, by the way, spend some time listing the tasks and the jobs that you or the people on your team do each day, and then place them in the correct quadrant on the chart. You'll be shocked, by the way, at how many of your activities fall into that quadrant 4, the last quadrant. And when you find those activities, those are things that you want to absolutely stop doing. Those you don't want to be doing those things in that quadrant at all. And those quadrant 4 activities, by the way, they would include things like scrolling through social media or chatting with coworkers, that kind of thing. Now, I'm not saying those things aren't important. I'm just saying that a lot of times we will use those as distractions. We'll come up with a good idea, and then we'll pop into a coworker's office, interrupt the coworker, and get off topic. So instead of just relaying the idea to the coworker, now we start chatting about everything under the sun, and now we've wasted 22 minutes. That's the kind of stuff that we really want to avoid as a supervisor. Keep our team motivated and on the right track. The third quadrant, by the way, would include things like that should be minimized, really, or avoided. For instance, I just on my own cell phone, I used to have news alerts. I still do, by the way, but I just don't look at them as often. But I used to have these news alerts that would appear on my phone, and the news alert, when the feed would alert my phone, it would create an alarm. It was identical to the message alarms from my clients. So when I would hear the alert, I'd stop what I was doing. Even if it was something really, really important, urgent, I would immediately go and look at my phone to see what the alert was about. And at the time, by the way, it seemed urgent because there was an alarm attached to it. However, really the thing that was being alerted to me wasn't really important at all. It would be a headline that didn't apply to me, didn't apply to my business, but I would take time out of my day to go and look at it. So one of the things that I did was I just kind of changed the alarms on my phone to make it to where I'm only getting, especially during the business day, I'm only getting distracted by things that are urgent and important, and it really helps. So once you've identified these items that are in quadrants 1 and 2, especially, really all 4 quadrants, but the ones that are in 1 and 2, those are the things that you want to schedule with your team. You want to start with the quadrant 1 items because those are the things that have to be done right now. They're urgent, and they're things that are important to the success of our group. And then for the quadrant 2 items, we want to plan and organize and strategize on the things that are in quadrant 2, because we want to make sure that those things get done before they become urgent. So those would be the things that, hey, once these urgent projects are done, we're going to spend some time organizing the quadrant 2 things to make sure that they never become urgent. So that reduces the stress, increases morale, and it makes it a whole lot easier. And then the last thing that I would suggest people do is identify the triggers for the not important but urgent items, and then just eliminate them, kind of like I did with my phone feeds. Those triggers, those things that are triggering that item to become urgent, if you can eliminate the triggers, a lot of times you can save some time and make yourself more efficient and make your team members more efficient as well. So anyway, so those would be the things that I would kind of suggest to kind of really help you get better organizational skills with your team. If you do those things, you're going to increase productivity pretty dramatically, also reduce stress and increase morale at the same time. So lots of good benefits for doing those things. So the third skill that is really important, and this is where we start to differ a little bit with the managerial skills, is that as a supervisor, you are the conduit between management and the team. So you want to really work on your communication skills. So as a supervisor, by the way, that conduit, you're between management and your team. So you're the one that you're the path that good communication comes through. So when you're getting information from management, it's important that you pass that information along when it's appropriate, and vice versa. When you're getting information that's important to the decision-making process for management, you pass that along to them as well. So your communication skills, by the way, have to just be top-notch if you're in a supervisory position. These skills, by the way, include providing that needed information to your team in a timely manner when it's appropriate. And in addition, though, a major part of especially first-time supervisor skills is to listen to your team. Your observations are critical to helping management make more informed decisions. Like, for example, let's say that management creates a brand new policy to fix a challenge that we've experienced in the past. So this is a big problem, and so as a result, we've changed a policy in order to fix that problem. Now, because you know your team really well, because you're a good supervisor, you anticipate that your team is going to react negatively to that change. So because a lot of times they're going to react negatively to any change. So if you just go to your team and just tell them, "Hey, management change the policy," then you're right. They will react negatively to that change. So instead, what you may want to do is kind of meet with your team and tell them about the problem that is trying to be solved by this policy change. Before you actually tell them that the policy is being changed, tell them about the problem. Get them to focus on that problem. And then you can soften the blow by explaining how management created the new policy to solve the problem. And then the final thing that you want to do because this is where your role as a supervisor can be very, very beneficial to the company as a whole, is ask the people that are on your team. These are the folks that are on the front line, if they can think of any better solutions. If they come up with one, then you bring that solution to management. Now you're the hero and your team's the hero. On the other hand, if they don't come up with a better solution, then at least they'll know why management has changed the policy, and they'll be much more open to that policy change. So all of those things are really, really important. Interactions and communications like this, they really keep the team from experiencing the old us versus them mentality that tends to happen in a lot of organizations. So the supervisors are the conduit to make sure that mentality doesn't get created in the first place. Fourth skill that is really, really important for supervisors is the skill to train your folks. The success of your team really depends on your ability to train the people that work for you, work around you, work with you. In fact, this is really one of the most important supervisory tips to really strengthen and become really good at, because as a supervisor, you really have to focus on two important components related to this skill, the training skill. First, you have to be able to assess the knowledge and the skill level of your team members. Remember, a lot of times we're inheriting these team members. And so as a result, we have to kind of figure out who's really good at what. And then second, once you identify any needed training, you have to be able to help your team members gain those needed skills or that needed information. So this process, by the way, can take a little time, but the effort will be absolutely well rewarded. You're going to get some phenomenal results if you kind of go through this process. So one of the things that I would suggest that you do is make a list of the skills and the knowledge that are needed for each job description within your team. Like for instance, we at our company, we have account managers that they're I don't want to call them salespeople, because that's not really what they do. They're more like consultants. So they're helping our clients make good decisions with their training dollars and that kind of thing. But the position has a lot of different roles. These are experts in the industry. And, for instance, they do things as simple as answering customers' questions. If a customer has a question, they'll answer that, but they also consult with the customers to help them create good decisions. They also provide good customer service. So they're helping with scheduling and all kinds of stuff like that. In addition to those normal kind of consultation roles, they also serve a marketing role within the company as well. So they do a lot of our marketing and social media, because they're kind of on the front line. And then the last part is they also have administrative duties, meaning that when contracts are sold, or when they're written up, that information has to be passed along to the appropriate people so that the programs get implemented properly, and that invoicing is done properly, and all that kind of stuff. So there's cost reports, there's revenue reports, and things like that they're also responsible for. So anyway, a lot of different roles within that. So once the supervisor has the list of roles and responsibility, kind of like what I laid out for our account managers, the next step is now to assess the team in each of these areas. Each team member, each person that we have on the team is going to be really, 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 really good at some of those tasks. And they're also going to be not so good at other tasks, right? Like for instance, you may be, for our sales team or our account managers, because they are salespeople, because they are consultants, they may be really, really good at working with customers. Customers love them. They're really good at helping solve problems, that kind of thing, but maybe not so good at paperwork, right? And so they may have challenges within the reports. So what you want to do is once you have that list of items or job responsibilities, you want to go through and rate each member of your team based on where they are now in each one of those job roles. For instance, you might just rate them on a scale of 1 to 10, or some people like to use like high school letter grades. This is an A plus, A minus, B plus, B minus, that kind of thing. I like just 1 through 10. It makes it really, really easy. 1 means that they're not very good. 10 means that they're excellent. So for instance, one of the things that our customer or our account managers have to do is they have to be able to answer questions for customers. So let's say I've got a person named Joan that has a lot of experience. She's been with the company for a number of years, and she's an 8 out of 10. However, Jim, a newer guy, he's only been in the position for less than a year. So currently he's a 4 out of 10, not because Jim isn't as smart as Joan. It just means that she's been here a lot longer. She's got more experience, and so she's more skilled in that particular area. So basically, once you kind of identify where each person is on that list, the last thing you want to do is go through your team list one more time, but this time assess each one of those people on their potential in each of those areas. So going back to the previous example with Joan and Jim, Joan is an 8 out of 10. However, she is the most senior person on the team, and she's kind of set in her ways. So as a result, her potential may also be an 8 out of 10. She's probably, because she's set in her ways, she's not up to changing or growing or doing things differently. Most likely, she's going to be an 8 next year, and the year after, and the year after, and the year after, right? Jim, on the other hand, because he's new and eager, he's a 4 now, but he wants to learn. And so he may have the potential of being a 9 or a 10. So if that's the case, then the supervisor, once we kind of have these roles outlined and where people are, where our team members are in each one of those roles, the supervisor in that situation would want to spend more time training Ben on that specific responsibility, so that he is more likely to reach his potential sooner. He's not going to go and train Joan for customer. She's already awesome at it. So he's not going to spend a lot of time training the whole team. He might pull Ben aside and say, hey, let's see if we can help you in this area. And now the supervisor is helping Ben become more productive. So really good supervisors are able to identify where their people are and where they need help. And sometimes it's just a matter of organizing it in a way so that you can find the right solutions at the right time. So the last skill that is really important for supervisors is people skills, because supervisors, they have to stay in rapport with both the team member and the management all the time, which can be really, really challenging, by the way. We'll kind of talk about that. But before I get into that, I recently heard a quote from Dave Ramsey. He's the guy that does the radio program on financial planning, teaches people how to get out of debt. Really, really smart guy. And on one of his shows, he made this really profound statement about education and people skills. And he basically said, I think the lie we've told people in the marketplace is that a degree gets you a job. A degree doesn't get you a job. He said, what gets you a job is the ability to carry yourself into that room, shake a hand, and look someone in the eye, and have good people skills in the process. Those are the things that cause people to become successful. And I couldn't agree more with that statement, because for supervisors, especially as the conduit between management and the team members, we have to really stay in rapport with both of those groups. And this is going to require that you have great people skills, right? Human nature tells us that when someone slights us, we've got to respond in anger. Somebody, oh my God, I can't believe that person did that to me, right? However, a person with really good people skills will often kind of pause and then think about a proper response. There's a real big difference between reacting to something that somebody said or something that they did and responding. And ultimately, the more trust that the other person has in you, the more the other person is going to like you as well. I'll give you a really good example from my own kind of personal experience. This is like from my younger days, but my first boss, this is back when I was in high school, but my first boss was a guy named Jeff, and he was a retired military officer. I liked him a lot. And everybody did. Everybody that worked for him. And he basically, after he retired from the Army, he purchased a franchise, and he hired me as one of these employees. So as a retired military officer, he knew the value of building his team members. So he and his wife, they were partners in the company, and they created this really fun, rewarding environment. We were growing as people, and it was a real friendly place to work. And the folks that worked for these two folks really, and we enjoyed going to work, even though the work was kind of hard. It wasn't really, the work itself wasn't fun, but the people that we worked with were fantastic, right? Well, a year or so after I'd started working for the company, Jeff sold the franchise back to the company, and he retired again. So the company that owned the franchises, they decided to use this location as a training ground for new managers. Since it was now company owned, they started sending in some of their managers that had just graduated from college or from their internal school. And each of these managers, by the way, had 4 years of university training in this specific industry. So they were totally qualified to run this franchise. The problem is that none of them really had any real practical experience supervising anyone. So they were basically skipping the supervisory level and jumping right into management. And so they hadn't yet built that rapport with their team members. And the contrast in environment was just absolutely torture, is probably the best way to say it, because morale just plummeted. And within 6 months, the entire staff that I worked with had turned over almost 100%. There were maybe one or two people that stuck on. Those were folks that had been working for the same company for like 20 plus years or so, and it was their career. But all of the part-timers like myself, the high school kids, man, we were gone. We jumped ship pretty early because it was no longer fun. We didn't enjoy it. So the key thing to keep in mind about this is that the people skills that we have, the better we are at building that trust and building that rapport with our team members and also with management, the better of a conduit we're going to be between those two entities to make sure that we're keeping morale high, that we're keeping that people are having fun, and we're creating that team culture. And so if you happen to be a business owner and you're seeing challenges within your organization, if you're seeing situations where morale is down or there's conflicts repeatedly in your organization, it quite possibly means that the supervisors that you have probably need to be retrained. They're going to need some help. And the more help that you can give them, the better morale is going to be. So next week, by the way, we're going to conclude the series on soft skills, and I'm going to do an entire session on interpersonal skills or people skills. Basically, what we've covered in the last couple of minutes, we're going to cover, by the way, some of the challenges that the managers in training that I just mentioned, what they created. And I'm going to show you some really cool ways to fix that. So we'll see you next week on High Impact Leaders. Bye, y'all.